December, pinnacle month of the holidays, the time when some souls are filled with joy over the hope of the season, and some souls are crushed by the anguish of capitalistic greed. And nothing better represents this peculiar dichotomy of joy and despair, anguish and hope, than the Decemberists. The month of December is proving to be a quite fruitful time for our friends the Decemberists. After all, they've reissued their first 2 albums on vinyl, they've dropped a bunch of holiday merch, and they're doing a special new live home recording of one of their concerts performing the entirety of The Hazards of Love live. Those of you who are familiar with the Decemberists probably know The Hazards of Love is their one big concept album. It's the only album where every song participates in one big cohesive story. Or so you think. Because here's the thing. I have been doing the research. I have been diving deep into the inner world of the Decemberists, and I have discovered something truly profound. Every Decemberist song exists in the same universe. And I am going to tell you why. After I finish this cup of tea. Vanilla almond, it's very good. Now, the first question when you're pulling off an ordeal like this is obviously which songs are canon in the Decemberist universe. They have a lot of music to their name. For my purposes, I chose to eliminate all of the covers, all of the live songs, and all of the remixes, which leaves me with 134 songs. I took it a step further and removed the songs that had music by the Decemberists but not lyrics, which are Ben Franklin's song, which has lyrics by Lin-Manuel Miranda, and Sonnet, which has lyrics by Dante Alighieri, the Divine Comedy guy. So, that just leaves 132 canonical Decemberist songs. And because I am nothing if not thorough, I listened to all of them. All of them. Much like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or MCU, all 132 of these songs fit together to make one shared universe, which is called the Decemberists Music Verse, or DMV for short. Like most other shared universes, the songs themselves don't tell like one whole cohesive story. It's more like individual stories that sometimes overlap with each other, and that all exist within the same world. Now, before I start digging in deep and telling you how each song plays its part in the DMV, I have a couple of disclaimers for you. First of all, I'm not an expert. There are a lot of real historical things that are referenced in Decemberist songs, and I only learned about them as much as like one look on Wikipedia could tell me. And furthermore, along that point, most of the lyrics that I was looking up came from the internet. I have physical lyric sheets for a few albums, but not all of them. And the thing about lyrics on the internet is they tend to get things wrong. So it is entirely probable that I am using the wrong words in terms of how I am putting the story together, and that's just occupational hazard. And furthermore, guys, lyrics are vague. Lyrics can mean literally anything to any number of people. That's part of the beauty of songwriting. But that means that how I interpret the lyrics is probably different from how you interpret the lyrics. So there's probably gonna be times where I put a song up on this board and you're like, what the fuck? That's not what that's about. But, I mean, I'm sorry. So, bottom line is, I may be wrong about things, and you're gonna have to live with that. Because I may be factually wrong, but I'm always right. Disclaimer number 2. If you are not familiar with the Decemberists, you should know that some of the songs go into some pretty dark places. And because I'm going to be talking about every single Decemberist song, that means that I am going to be discussing some topics that might make you uncomfortable. So I'm going to put a list somewhere on the screen next to me that is going to contain every sensitive topic that I talk about. So pause the video, take a nice long look at this here list, and just read it, make sure you've read it thoroughly, and if any of the topics are something you don't want to see someone talking about right now, why don't you look at my other 2 Decemberist-related videos, Chimbly.mp4 and Engine.mp4, link in description. Alright, baby, if you're good to go, then you know what that means. It's time to go to the DMV. The world of the DMV takes place in a world that is almost, but not quite like our own. It's sort of like steampunk. except with less cool steam things and more murder. The DMV doesn't really have a creation myth or origin story, so to speak, but it does have this, the Kingdom of Spain, which kind of sets up the whole way that the world and the story is structured. One of the major differences between our world and the DMV is while our world has a bunch of individual countries that are just kind of willy-nilly, the Decemberist world mostly consists of 3 kingdoms. These 3 kingdoms correspond to real places in our world, but they act as sort of big conglomerates. So you will hear place names like France or Illinois, but ultimately they don't exist in like the countries that we know of. They exist in the 3 kingdoms. So the song Kingdom of Spain really lays that out. It lays out the Kingdom of Spain, obviously, which is kind of Europe. It lays out the Kingdom of Light, which is Russia, which is separate from Europe in this. And it lays out the Kingdom of Love, which is the Americas. Asia and Africa are barely referenced in the world of the Decemberists, so they're there, but they're just kind of doing their own thing. Furthermore, not only does each verse in Kingdom of Spain talk about each individual kingdom, it also talks about the 4 main eras that the story is separated into. I don't want to give everything away just yet, but I will tell you this. The first verse corresponds to the Kingdom of Spain and the first era. The second verse corresponds to the Kingdom of Light and the middle 2 eras. And the last verse corresponds to the Kingdom of Love and the final era. So there you have it. The entirety of the Decemberist universe is built on a B-side, motherfuckers. I need to get some tape for this. Hang on. Magic of the modern world. The other song that kind of sets the scene is Everything is Awful, which just kind of gives a vibe for the whole story. I think Colin Malloy just likes to make people suffer in his music. Okay, so that's the 2 songs that kind of set the scene. I'm gonna draw a little box around it to show that they're kind of standalone sort of deal. Woo! I mean, really, when you put these 2 songs together, it just goes to show that, you know, in the instead of the Kingdom of Spain, we got the. You see what I'm doing here? It's a kingdom of pain. Now that we have kind of set the scene for our Decemberists music verse, we now begin with the first era, the Renaissance era. Our tale begins the way all tales ought to begin, with a big parade for a baby. The Infanta tells the tale of the young heiress of the Kingdom of Spain. Before this song begins, the kind of background of it is the King of Spain has been exiled and his 3 young children have been all kind of classified as criminals and are set to be put to death. The king manages to take his eldest daughter with him and kind of hide his youngest daughter away, but unfortunately his young son is found and entombed in a cradle of clay and just dropped into the river. But don't worry, that's actually, it's not as bad as it sounds. It does get better from here. The new Queen of Spain winds up finding the youngest daughter in a basket in the river, not realizing that it is the daughter of the old king, and is like, you know what, I'm gonna adopt this child. It's like Moses. And so a big parade is held with all of the Spanish nobility to kind of kick things off. Now, 2 of the characters referenced in the Infanta are the Baron and the Baroness. They have a not really that great relationship because their one son died and the Baroness hasn't been able to give birth to any other children. As a result of that, they've developed a mutually abusive relationship. What happened to the king and his eldest daughter? Well, funny you should ask. They are sent off in a boat and wind up finding a abandoned, undiscovered island and starting a life there and finding all of the old magics. Sorry, that's something I probably should have mentioned at the beginning. The thing about the Renaissance era, what makes it particular in all of the Decemberist eras, is the fact that magic is running basically rampant. There's just kind of magic up the wazoo. Magic here, magic there, magic everywhere. And so one of the places where they find this magic is the island where they've been exiled to. Now, if this story sounds familiar to you, it does, because it's The Tempest by Bill Shakespeare. We got here the island. In this version, the island is completely uninhabited. Sycorax is long dead, and, what's his name? Caliban Caliban's not a thing. Instead, what happens is they're visited by the sailors of a boat called the Arethusa. The thing about the sailors of the Arethusa is they are jackasses. They are dipshits. And so, what winds up happening is one of the sailors on board the Arethusa, when they get shipwrecked on the island, they're kind of looking around. They wind up having sort of uneasy alliance with the inhabitants. But then one of the sailors finds Miranda alone and attempts to rape her. He does not succeed, and Miranda winds up murdering him, as she should. Now, the next several songs are all just kind of demonstrating the rampant magic that's running throughout this world. We got the crane wife cycle, where a man finds a crane, heals it, finds a woman, marries her, and then discovers that the woman was the crane the whole time, and it was like, oh no, I've been forcing her to weave, and it's been costing her her feathers, and now she's gone. I did struggle with the placement of this, because it's set in Japan, but also, it mentions a keening bell, which is a distinctly English tradition, so I just decided in the DMV, keening bells are just a thing everywhere. And then we got Rusalka Rusalka / Wild Rushes, which is about mermaids in Russia. Throughout the course of these songs, 2 different men are seduced by 2 different mermaids, and they both wind up drowning. Next up, we got River Swim, which was about taking a little boat trip down the river in Olden Kingdom of Love. Now, this next part is the one and only time that the Decemberists made my job easy. Because do you know what comes next? The entire Hazards of Love. So the plot to the Hazards of Love, I'm going to try to explain it as quickly as I possibly can, is basically this woman, Margaret, goes out riding one day and sees an injured deer and heals it, but oh, it's not a deer, it's a fawn, a deer person, and she does the logical thing and fucks it. Then she goes home, and then a few months later, oh, she's pregnant with the deer man whose name is William's child. And so she goes out and tries to find William, and is reunited with him. But the thing is, William's mom is the forest queen, who's the queen of the forest. And she does not want her son cavorting with mortals. So then William's like, hey mom, please, I want to be with this wonderful woman. Can you make me mortal for one night? And his mom's like, yeah, but just for the one night. And so it's wonderful, William is mortal. And it looks like the story is maybe gonna have a happy ending, except no, because out of fucking nowhere comes this asshole, the rake. And the rake shows up and he's like, hey, what's up? I'm gonna sing a song about how I murdered all 3 of my children. And after he's done singing his song, the rake goes and he kidnaps Margaret. He tries to run away, but oh, there's this big river that he can't cross. So he gets permission from the forest queen, who is like, yeah, I don't want this woman with my son. Do whatever you want with her, and she parts the river and lets him go through. And so now it's time for William to go, and he runs up to the river and bargains with it and is like, please, I want to cross, I want to save my loved one. It's looking pretty grim, but then suddenly out of nowhere comes the ghosts of the rake's children, who are like, Father, you killed us! And it freaks the rake out so much, understandably, that he runs away. And so William and Margaret are reunited, but they can't be together forever. And so they do the next logical thing, which is go back to the river and drown themselves. Real upper of a story from Mr. Colin Malloy. Now, as I said before, this story here is mostly self-contained. However, there are a few connections to other things that happen. Firstly, William was originally a mortal baby before the Queen found him and saved his life, because he was entombed in a cradle of clay. Sound familiar? That's right, bitch. He's the prince, technically. Secondly, where did the rake come from? I'll tell you where the rake came from. The Mariner's Revenge Song. So, the Mariner's Revenge Song, the whole deal with that is there's these 2 sailors who have been trapped in the belly of a whale after a huge shipwreck thing, and one of them is like, hey, I've got this story to tell you. You don't remember me, but you were 18 and I was a little boy, and you came to stay with my mother, and you basically ruined us financially and drove her to death. And so it's been my entire mission to track you down on your whaling ship, and now I'm gonna kill you because we're together inside of this whale. The object of the revenge is the rake. And it checks out, it works. In the Mariner's Revenge Song, when he goes to stay with the protagonist's mom, he's 18 years old. we'll say he stays there for about a year and then leaves. There's a 15-year window in the Mariner's Revenge song where the rake can go off, get married, have his children, do the entirety of the hazards of love, run away, get a job as a whaler, become captain of a whaling boat, and then the 15-year window has passed and the rest of the song can happen. That's the connection. The rake in the Mariner's Revenge song is the same as the rake in the Rake's song. Now there's one final connection that kind of ties a whole lot of stuff together, which is a cautionary song. A your mom joke in song form. A cautionary song is about a woman who goes to the harbor and sleeps with every single sailor in order to get enough money to feed her children. I can tell you with certainty that she has slept with the members of the Arethusa, she has slept with everybody on the Rake's whaling boat, probably slept with all of the privateers before the Mariner himself showed up, because the Mariner's a prude. The Mariner seems like the kind of guy who absolutely does not fuck. And I respect him for that. There's one last kind of standalone song in the Renaissance era before things start to wrap up, and that is Constantinople, a song that is sure to piss off They Mighty Giants. Constantinople is just about a guy who's gonna marry the princess, but the princess is in love with another man who has drowned. But alas, all good things must come to an end, and so it is with the Renaissance era, which concludes with Till the Water's All Long Gone. Because here's the thing. The magic that's been running rampant throughout this entire era, it doesn't just come from nowhere. There's this one specific source, a fountain, that exists in kind of an extra-dimensional space, and so that's why the whole world's supplied with magic. However, this fountain needs people to tend to it, and unfortunately, by the time we get to Till the Water's All Long Gone, there's just one guy who's been left behind by literally everybody else. He is the only one dedicated enough to watch the fountain. And unfortunately, what that means is, by the time the Renaissance is over, just about all of the magic's gone. The key word here is just about, but yeah, magic's dead. Magic's dead and gone. We're blocking out the Renaissance in green. This brings us to our second era, which I like to call the Victorian Era. Keep in mind, the naming of these eras it's not an exact science. The Victorian Era is kicked off with We Both Go Down Together, a song that seems kind of innocent, but the longer you listen to it, it's pretty dark. The whole deal with We Both Go Down Together is one of the noblemen of the Kingdom of Spain, who's been living this very charmed life, winds up taking a liking to this young woman in one of the labor camps. He basically coerces her into having sex with him, and is like, oh, but my parents, they will never consent to this love, which is it's a one-sided thing. He has a persecution complex. And so he tries to get his beloved to commit suicide with him so that they will be together forever. He jumps off the cliffs of Dover, but the thing is, she does not. She does not, unfortunately, last for very long, though, because she is pregnant with the nobleman's child and winds up giving birth in a ditch and then dying shortly thereafter. Leslie Ann Levine, everybody! Leslie Ann Levine is the first of many Decemberist songs that are about actually, no. The first of many Decemberist songs that are about ghosts is The Hazards of Love 3, but this is the one that kicks off ghosts in the Victorian era, which the Victorian era is the biggest period of ghosts. It's about Leslie Ann Levine, the daughter of the woman in We Both Go Down Together, who is very bitter about the fact that her mom made such, bad choices in romantic partners. Now, this song actually contains the first interesting fact about ghosts in the DMV, which is that ghosts age. Because, I mean, if you think about it, Leslie Ann Levine was... She also died in childbirth, and so there's, no way that she should be able to just, give these very verbose sentences, fall in love with another ghost. But she does, and that's why ghosts age in the world of the Decemberists. Now, Leslie Ann Levine kind of serves as the big kickoff to a whole string of songs that are just all about ghosts. The Legionnaire's Lament, a legionnaire who dies of dehydration. The Chimbley Suite, which is about a chimney sweep who also offers services as a male sex worker and then gets lodged inside a flue, which is like the worst possible way to die. His ghost, interestingly, eventually becomes a romance partner of Leslie Ann Levine. Eli, the barrow boy. A barrow boy who throws himself in a river because his true love is dead. Yankee Bayonet, a Confederate soldier dies in the first Bull Run, leaving his lover to grieve for him. A two-pack of songs. We got The Harrowed and the Haunted, which is about a guy on a boat who had a kind of troubled separation from his wife when he left to go out on the sea and is trying to hurry back home to make things right. Unfortunately, he does not. His wife forgave him, though, and has been waiting for him for 70 entire years. He's not coming back, though, because he's dead. Burying Davy, self-explanatory. E. Watson, which is a song about a real guy who lived in Florida who showed up and was like, hey, what if I start a plantation and kill some of the locals? And the locals were like, hey, what if we killed you? It is worth noting, though, even though Edgar Watson was a real person, in this story, he is actually a descendant of the rake. Because we know the rake's been sleeping around. What does that mean? Not much of anything, but it does tell you that the rake's lineage is continuing. So, keep that in mind. Rocks in the Box, another song that's kind of based in reality, which is about the very oppressive mining conditions in Butte, Montana, and a disaster that happened there in 1917, which claimed quite a few lives. Now, the Victorian era concludes with a cycle of songs that all tell one cohesive story, and what better way to end an era than with sex? Meet Billy Liar. He's a young lad and has only one thing on his mind. Fucking. His tale kicks off with the song from which he gets his name, which is just about him spending his days in his seaside town during the summer and just jacking off the whole time. His story continues with Down by the Water, which kind of acquaints you to the town in which he lives, just in a little harbor sort of district. It is worth noting that in this particular song, he's looking for love, and sex is just a bonus. He starts out reasonably okay. And then in Oceanside, he just gets even hornier, fantasizes about having sex on the beach. In Philomena, he finally gets it, because this is a song about cunnilingus. Once he loses his virginity, though, he does not chill. He winds up becoming like a raging sex maniac. Every summer, he tries to find as many girls as he possibly can to just do it with. And that's kind of summarized in the song Summer Song, which is about his many sexual summers. There's also quite a bit of morbid imagery in the background, like shipwrecks and dead sailors, and that's kind of to clue you in on the fact that this isn't a good dude. He is just using women as sex objects. And so summer after summer after summer happens, he keeps just kind of using women to get that sex. Things finally come to a head in Shiny. In Shiny, a fair comes to his seaside town, and he goes to the fair, and he winds up falling in love with one of the carnival workers. And I mean, like, he genuinely, it's not a situation where, like, he's using her, because he genuinely has feelings for her. But here's the thing. She's using him. They wind up getting caught in the act, and that's kind of the first time that everybody kind of realizes, hey, you know, this guy's kind of a sex maniac. And so Billy gets ostracized from society. Finally, we conclude with the Cap Street Girls. Billy is left a broken man who can't make things right because of just how many women he's had sex with and then abandoned. And so he turns to sex workers on Cap Street up until the Cap Street is demolished and he's just left with nothing. And the moral of that story is, if you're gonna have sex, do it with someone you're gonna treat with respect. Don't just have sex for the sake of having sex. We're gonna block out the Victorian era in red. So now we come to the third and longest era, the modern era. The modern era gets kicked off with the bang because World War II is happening. We got The Soldiering Life, which is about two gay little men fighting in the trenches. We got After the Bombs, which is about the citizens of Europe somewhere, planning what they're gonna do when the bombing campaign ends. Then we got When the War Came, which is about the siege of Leningrad, specifically the seed laboratory that was in there, where they had all these plant samples, and everybody was starving to death, but all of the workers like, no, we gotta preserve these rare seed samples. Now, we're gonna jump back to our good old town of Butte, Montana. The whole mining situation there really has not gotten better at all. It's gotten to the point where there's like a huge conflict between the owner of the mines, which are all kind of owned by this one family, and then the miners' union, which is run by a different family. But then, here's what happens. A guy from the union family falls in love with the daughter of the mining company family. He attempts to woo her throughout the song Angel Won't You Call Me. Because her brother is his longtime rival, he has some difficulty with it. But ultimately he woos her and makes a plan to run away. It doesn't go well though. Her brother finds them and he attempts to shoot the guy. The love interest takes the bullet and now she's dead. And so what the singer of Angel Won't You Call Me does is he does the next logical thing, which is commit arson and burns the entirety of Butte, Montana down. That's the plot of O Valencia. Meanwhile, in Russia, things are getting spicy. You know, the government's not great, generally speaking. That's what Fits and Starts is about. I think I need to get a drink of water. So, if there's one thing that Soviet Russia is good for, it's sending spies to America. And that's what they did. An American government worker winds up falling for one of these spies in the song The Bagman's Gambit. He gives the spy all these important documents, but then the spy gets caught and sent back to Russia. And then later, the bagman, who is the guy who works for the government, he winds up getting this call from his lover, who is been imprisoned in Soviet Russia because the Soviet government is like, we don't know where your loyalties lie. And so his lover is like, hey man, please, I need you to get me to safety. And so the bagman is like, all right, and winds up arranging passage for his lover so that he can come from Russia to the USA. I don't know if I said any pronouns before, but this is gay spies. But the thing is, the bagman knows that if he brings the spy back to America in order to keep the spy safe, he can never talk to him again. While he was occasionally able to talk to him while he was in Russia, stateside, communication will be dead from here on out. But he does it because that's how much he loves the spy. The problem is, the spy doesn't reciprocate. He has been using him this whole time just to get the information he needed and to get to safety. The bagman doesn't realize this though until 10 years after he brings him back to the US for his safekeeping, and he sees the spy in a car, and the spy barely acknowledges him, and that just breaks the bagman's heart. I promise, there's at least one relationship here where the gays stay together. Don't worry about it. Back to Butte for a moment. The guy who sang O Valencia and Angel Won't You Call Me, because he did commit arson, he does get hanged. His sister, however, during this whole time has gone off and kind of lived this very like hedonistic, kind of almost jet-set-y lifestyle. But then she becomes old and kind of sad. She has a son that was fathered in an illegitimate tryst, and that's what Days of Elaine is about. Eventually, Elaine's son grows up. He falls for a woman named Julie, who is an actress whose kind of mission statement is detailed in I Was Meant for the Stage. But their relationship doesn't really work out, and so they break up in the first part of I Don't Mind. The second part of I Don't Mind is about the king of Spain. Because Europe is just one place, which is Spain, World War II was essentially a civil war that everybody else just happened to get involved in, and so the Kingdom of Spain is in shambles. The third part of this song, though, goes back to Elaine. What she has her son do when she gets old is she just has him carry her out to the forest and leave her to die. Kind of fucked up, but it doesn't really bother her son. Her son is a pretty major character, so from here on out, let's call him the Vagabond. Eventually, the vagabond goes to somebody else's wedding and meets Caroline. They kind of have this connection because they've got this desire to live life recklessly and hedonistically. And that's what happens in the song Sunshine. Then in the song Clementine, Caroline's life kind of falls apart, and so they're like, you know what? Let's get married and let's travel to somewhere else. In As I Rise, they go to California, but it's not really for them, so they decide to go to Oregon. And so they travel along California 1, go up to Portland, Oregon. The vagabond is this very charismatic person, and so he's able to recruit this kind of whole group of people that are all just kind of the various outcasts of society, and is like, hey, we're gonna found a commune. And he calls them the Youth and Beauty Brigade. There's a bit in the middle of this song that references a person named Annabelle, and I really couldn't figure out like how to fit that into the world. Maybe Annabelle is the name of the god who created the world. We'll just say that for now. Among the various outcasts they are able to recruit a concubine born in poverty and the victim of sexual abuse, a guy who just sucks at football, and a couple, a pair of young male sex workers who have been living homeless in the streets of Portland after running away from home. One of them is named Avery. The other one can be named whatever you want. Let's say, Filbert. Things go fantastically. The vagabond and Caroline's relationship, thriving. Everybody's having a good time just being super reckless. That's what happens in I for You and You for Me. And the commune they start, also fantastic. They have a whole year of just absolute wonderful peace. But not for long. Because here's the thing. When you are a person whose life philosophy is very centered on sort of recklessness, when you've got sort of this time of peace that's happened, it doesn't really sit well with you. And so the vagabond starts getting plagued with these troubling dreams. He dreams he's a soldier who's guarding Auschwitz. He dreams he is an architect who builds great things that all come tumbling down. And he dreams he is a lover in the Kingdom of Spain who goes around seducing people. Caroline, meanwhile, is pretty happy with the peace that she's found. And so, hearing him describing these dreams, she furrows like a lioness, which basically means her reaction is just... And so the vagabond is like, you know what? You know what the solution to this is? Committing some crime. So he uses his uncanny skills of persuasion and charisma to convince a whole lot of people to join his cause. Basically creates a whole sect of the commune that's like, cool, it's crime time, baby. So that's cavalry captain. And so they go out and commit their first crime, which is a bank robbery, which almost goes well, but then doesn't. They get chased by cops. A few of them die. Most of them get caught. The vagabond's all right. His lover, Caroline, bails them out of jail, but she realizes that her relationship with this man she thought she loved, it's not great. It's not going great. It's kind of turning into a monster. And so, in a record year for rainfall, the two of them watch as their relationship kind of just deteriorates away. Finally, matters come to a head in Sleepless, where the vagabond goes out to Illinois and murders the man who conceived him. And he returns home, and Caroline is like, okay, you know what, that's it, we're done. And she kicks out him and all of his followers from the commune. After that, Caroline becomes really depressed and frustrated because, like, her relationship with this man has been for most of her life. And so in Raincoat Song, she just kind of fumes for a while before finally kind of taking the reins of her life and bringing the commune back to a good state. Not one to be put off by anything as simple as being kicked out of his home, the vagabond commits another perfect crime. He manages to use his followers from the commune and gain a few new followers, one of which is the Bagman. Because here's the thing. If it turns out that the man you thought you loved doesn't love you back, even after 10 years of yearning, you're gonna maybe have something of a crisis. And what do you do when you have a crisis? The obvious thing, turn to a life of crime. And so they attempt to rob another bank, but once again, it goes bad at the last minute, and everybody is either killed or imprisoned. So while he's in jail, basically for life because of the scale of the crime he did, the vagabond has another strange dream. A dream about healing the world, by killing the people in it. And so, what's a mentally unstable man who has been imprisoned for life and has a dream like this to do? Well, the obvious thing, turn to eugenics. He winds up using his unnatural skills of charisma in order to basically convince a whole bunch of people in the prison, including some guards, that, hey, you know what we need to do to make the world a better place is to kill a bunch of people. And the dude is so charismatic that, like, he manages to convince the guards to let him out of prison so that he can carry out this plan. And so, now he's got a new batch of followers that are all about murder. I've been recording this video for like 2 hours. I need a snack. This is a musty granola bar. Oh my god. So, I know you're all very excited to see what this wacky motherfucker has going on, but we're gonna take some time to talk about somebody completely different. We interrupt this program to bring you the story of a boy by the name of Jack, who has a very, let's say, colorful family history. His parents met each other in Paris before World War II, and they both had very weird professions. His mother was a Chinese trapeze artist. His older sister meets and marries a communist, and they move to South Carolina because his life's dream is to start a punk rock band there. And then meanwhile, he was born in a brothel and then gets sold to a brigadier to do ship work. But his life's dream is to work in a bakery, so that's not really working out well for him. The South Carolina punk rocker winds up finding success, and then he sells out. And the singer addresses his audience. Now, one of his fans, who is particularly pissed off by this, happens to be a follower of the Vagabond. And so, what he does is, in the song Carolina Low, goes to South Carolina and begins a spree of murder and sexual violence that winds up claiming the life of the punk rock guy. And then we have Easy Come, Easy Go, a song of 4 little vignettes of strange little tragedies. Jack from My Mother Was a Chinese Trapeze Artist dies in a shipboard accident. An unnamed woman who never comes up again is looking in her rearview mirror, but not the road, and that doesn't go well. The Vagabond becomes a very well-known and distinguished gentleman, as meanwhile his body count just grows higher and higher. And then Julie from I Was Meant for the Stage finds success as an actress, but ultimately winds up taking her own life without anybody noticing. Now imagine for a moment that you're a vagabond. You've got this huge bunch of followers who are taking on your fold-culling doctrine quite nicely. You've become a pretty distinguished gentleman. What do you do next? Well, the answer to that question is you start looking up your own ancestry. When looking up his own ancestry, the vagabond discovers that he is actually a descendant of the rake. He doesn't really learn a whole lot about the horrible things that the rake did, because that's not his focus. What instead he learns about is his time in the forest of the Forest Queen. Again, magic is all but dead, but the vagabond suddenly gets this idea in his head that maybe it's still there. And so he figures out where the forest is. And determines it is in Ireland. And so he takes his forces there, they go through Ulster and to the forest, and it begins this big conflict between the Forest Queen, who is still alive, and the Vagabond. And where is this conflict detailed, you may ask? The Táin. Supposedly, the Táin is a retelling of an old Gaelic myth called the... I'm not even gonna try to pronounce it. But the thing is, this song takes actually quite a bit of liberties and isn't like a straight retelling. There's a lot of room for interpretation. And there's an anachronism, because at one point, it references a motorcade and the M5. The Táin is set in 1 AD. That doesn't work. So, I instead opted to put it in a more modern setting, befitting of its modern references. I did read a plot summary of the original story of the Táin just to kind of understand what's happening, and there is one thing that carries over, which is that the people of Ulster have this curse upon them, where every so often, everybody gets what are essentially labor pains, and the rake manages to strike while this is happening, and so he succeeds at stealing the secret of magic from the Forest Queen. I do just want to take the time to say something, which is that the Táin is it's regarded by a lot of people as being the Decemberists' best work, and I feel that this is best exemplified by this line from the first part of the song, which is, "You're a salty little pisser with your cock in her kisser." Poetry. Hey, you know what else was going on in Ulster around that time? That's right, the Troubles. Shankill Butchers, baby. So, what does the vagabond do now that he has the secret of magic? Well, you're not gonna find out for a long while, but just hold on. So then meanwhile, we have the standalone story of Valerie Plame, a fictionalized version of the real CIA operative. This particular song is about a foreign government guy who winds up falling in love with Valerie Plame and giving all of his secrets away. So apparently that's just a thing that happens when the American government is involved in stuff. But now I would like to take the time to dive into a completely different story arc. And our story centers on a young man by the name of Emery. That's a fact that's going to be pretty funny in about half a year or so. Emery is a really unfortunate guy. His parents pass away when he is at the tender age of 9 years old, and he winds up developing some pretty bad insecurities. No matter what, he is convinced that disaster is around the corner. Even when things are happening just fine, he can't get over the idea that things are gonna go badly. One of the ways this is exemplified is in a little incident that happens between he and his friend Stephen. The thing about Stephen is he takes a lot of vacations, usually with his sweetheart. And while he's on vacation, he needs people to watch over his stuff. So he entrusts his bicycle by the name of Madeline to Emery. Emery does a pretty good job, up until he leaves Madeline outside of a grocery store and it's stolen. Emery is an aspiring writer, so he writes an entire poem, apology song, to Stephen, basically like, "I am so terribly sorry that I lost your bicycle." And Stephen takes it in stride, but Emery really beats himself up about it. In July, we learn a lot more about Stephen's childhood. July actually contains the second interesting fact about ghosts in the DMV, which is that chicken ghosts are real. And we know this because Stephen lives in a slaughterhouse, an old slaughterhouse, abandoned, and he hears them. So that's a fact about ghosts. That's interesting. But this isn't the story of Stephen, this is the story of Emery. At the end of his teenage years, Emery attempts to woo one of his peers, but doesn't really do a good job of it, and because he wants to be a writer, he tries to write to get his feelings about it out, but he doesn't like it and he throws it away. And that's Lake Song. Eventually he gets older and he does find a girl who actually loves him. The problem is, because he is so insecure, he is just convinced that every single minor setback is proof that the relationship is going to fall apart. And this is exemplified in the song, "Everything I Try to Do, Nothing Seems to Turn Out Right." And his girlfriend does love him, but she wants him to kind of, get over himself a little bit, not just keep focusing on the worst and thinking the worst is going to happen. All Arise is kind of her internal monologue during their relationship. Eventually, they wind up getting married and kind of falling into an unsteady sort of peace, as exemplified in the song of Angels and Angles. And then everything kind of comes to a head, because it turns out Emery's wife is pregnant. Because of Emery's history of tragedy and the death of his parents, he really does not think he'll be a good father, and the idea of fatherhood terrifies him. And so, throughout the song Hurdles Even Here, he kind of struggles with that. He tries to put on a brave face, but it doesn't hold. And it just exacerbates his feelings of that things are gonna go downhill. He's just certain that the relationship now is doomed to fail. And he winds up becoming a moderately successful author, but all of the books he writes are just him trying to kind of exorcise and make sense of what he thinks is going on in the relationship. That's the engine driver. Finally, it gets to the point where his wife just snaps at him. She's like, "Dude, I have stood by you this whole time, and never once have I let you down, never once have I not had your back. You think I'm going to abandon you? Why would I now?" Eventually, the inevitable does happen, and as depicted in the song Make You Better, They separate. Emery winds up moving to Oregon and buying a farmhouse, and he spends his first winter away from his wife in the song January Hymn. Time goes on, Emery's writing career continues, by which I mean it continues to stagnate. Emery is the mid-list author. His books are never the best, but they're never the worst. And they never really wind up being super successful. They just kinda are. Hey, you know who else is an author? Mila Goldberg. That's right, bitch, it's bee season. I've never read Bee Season. I know it's about spelling bees, I think, but I don't know what it's about, so I'm just gonna... Song for Mila Goldberg's just gonna go next to mid-list author, because books. Anyway, Emery comes to realize that his separation from his wife it's hitting him a lot harder than he would have thought, and he becomes really depressed. He just feels so lost, because he has tried to figure out the whole love thing, but he's never really been able to actually reciprocate. So he tries to kill himself, but it doesn't wind up working, and he winds up alive and like without so much as an injury. And so he's just kind of left to be miserable. But we're gonna take some time away from Emery right now, because who cares for that guy? Do you remember Avery and his lover from On the Bus Mall? You know how they ran away from their families? Well, Avery's mom was really heartbroken, and she just wants him to come home. Eventually, Avery's family does find him, and they try to get him to come home, but like, in a homophobic way. Like in sort of that, hey, we love you, and we want to be with you, we want to be together again, and also you cannot bring your boyfriend with you. And so in the song Tripping Along, Avery's partner kind of tries to console him as his relatives all kind of try to get into his head. Down on the Knuckle is another song with multiple vignettes. The first one, our old pal Emery falls ill and has to kind of spend his whole time inside. Second one is Sylvia, who is another author who suffers from severe agoraphobia. She never comes up again. And then Avery's relatives have kind of switched tactics. They're trying to be super sweet, super gushy, but it's not working out. And then Avery's lover has gone to jail for a petty crime. The whole song is narrated by Avery's lover, by the way. It's him kind of... Everybody's located in Oregon, so it's him kind of recapping a bunch of stuff that is happening with people he knows. Hey, have you been wondering what Steven's been doing? Steven from Apology Song? So he got married to his childhood sweetheart, but then their relationship kind of started to deteriorate, and so he was like, hey, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take you on vacation to one of the first places we went on vacation together. That's Oh New England. The vacation doesn't really work out. And then her dad dies, and they go to San Francisco for the funeral. So the relationship's not going well, they've been struck with personal tragedy, they've got a kid, so what does Steven do? He says, hey, let's go on another vacation, this time to France. It also goes poorly. At this point though, the couple has kind of had a troubling realization. The only thing that's keeping their relationship together, it's the vacations they take. And so they wind up traveling on to a whole slew of places. They're barely happy, but that's the only way that they can stay together. One of the places they go to, the city of Los Angeles. And they fucking hate it the whole time. Fuck, I need another whiteboard. We don't have another whiteboard stand, so I'm gonna see if I can just prop up our second whiteboard on this chair. Baby wants a new spin. Baby wants a broken heart. That's probably fine. So, the reason why Steven's whole vacationing thing is important is because eventually, after Emery recovers from his illness, Steven invites him to come on one of the couple's vacations. They go on a little road trip up to a river, and it's, it sucks the whole time for Emery because, your friend and his wife are having a very, they've got a very strained thing happening right now, and you're just kind of a spectator. There is one good thing that comes out of this vacation, though, because Emery sees how miserable Steven and his wife are together, and he has an epiphany about his own relationship. He realizes that literally everything about it was mostly his fault. He kept thinking that any slight disturbance was a sign that the whole thing was going to collapse, without realizing that what love is, it's putting in the work. You can't just abandon ship at the slightest notice. You've got to put in the work. And so he has this epiphany, and he vows that he is going to become better. He is going to put in the work, and he is never going to just wallow in his own misery again. Anti-summer song. So, he reunites with his wife. He writes her a poem, I'll Be Your Girl, which he knows that she will like, and he asks her to take him back, and promises that he's going to put the work in their relationship. And it's not an empty promise, because he does. He rebuilds his relationship with his wife and meets his son for the first time. Throughout the songs Rise to Me and Foregone, he puts in the work and becomes a better husband and a better father. Finally, that summer, his family moves in with him in the farmhouse he bought in Oregon, and they spend the June together. Emery's story concludes with a beginning song. He has put in the work to get over his own insecurities, and as a result, he has fallen in love with his family, his friends, himself, the world. He has found peace. Except not really. Because now it's time to transition from the end of the modern era to the beginning of the next one. These next few songs kind of set the stage for what's going to come in the future. We've got The Wrong Year, which is about the granddaughter of the woman that Billy falls in love with in Shiny. Her name is Gray Jane, and the song's basically about some, like, kind of a romantic relationship she has. And then we've got Red Right Ankle, which is about her later on. It's a song that was written to her by her lover, a troubadour by the name of Joseph. Finally, the last song that ends the modern era and begins the next one is 16 Military Wives. It just kind of goes to show that even in this fictional universe, America sucks. And the reason why it is here is because it is meant to show how what happens next is able to happen. Outlining the modern era in blue over here. I'm not even gonna bother with this board. So now we have come to the fourth and final era, the Apocalypse Era. Because all good things must come to an end, and that includes the DMV. Because while all of this stuff, this nice stuff with Emery and Stephen and whatnot has been happening, our friend the Vagabond has been rising to power. Like a Lion details, sort of, how he kind of becomes more and more well-regarded. Side note, if you don't have Spotify, Like a Lion is fucking hard to find. The only video that exists of it on YouTube is like a thing where a guy used the song and put footage of his vacation over it. Eventually, he winds up getting put in charge of the Kingdom of Love. And in Severed, he details his new plan to bring his culling of the fold mentality into law. Now, in real life, Severed was written about a fucking loser who got kicked out of office. That person's no longer relevant, so it's about a fictional person now. When people see this terrible man being elected, they have different responses. You've got I Will Not Say Your Name, which is a sort of symbol of quiet resistance. You've got Better Not Wake the Baby, which is kind of about, yeah, things are bad, but don't cause a ruckus. And then you've got 12-17-12, which is a really well done song about kind of the feeling that you get when you are living a comfortable life and there is a tragedy out there that is not affecting you directly, but is affecting a lot of other people, and just kind of trying to make sense of the dichotomy between your own privileged, peaceful life and the terrible things that are happening. Now here's where things start to get interesting. From out of the forest, where the Vagabond got the magic abilities that allowed him to raise up in the ranks of society, come two soothsayers, the Star Watcher and the Sky Watcher. And the two of them see certain disaster if this guy continues to be in charge. They conclude their sharing of their visions with an anecdote, The Gymnast High Above the Ground, which talks about how things, no matter what, lead to their natural conclusions. And what those conclusions are depends on what the things are. Now, recognizing the injustices of what is happening, and taking into account the prophecies, a resistance starts to build up. And who is at the front of this resistance but Grey Jane? She becomes the Bandit Queen, and her lover, Joseph, spends his time just going from bar to bar telling her story. That's why this has dialogue and tap dancing in it. Hearing about this, though, the vagabond is like, absolutely not, and cracks down on people trying to resist against him, making this declaration in one engine. So then, you know what happens? War. War breaks out. The Bandit Queen rallies forces to her side, gets a strong resistance going, and with a rallying cry, cries out, "This is why we fight!" and charges against the forces of the Kingdom of Love. And then it fails. The problem is, the Bandit Queen's dog gets a spur stuck in its paw, and so she is like, oh, I gotta deal with my dog, and then gets distracted and loses the war. The war rages for a long, long while, causing a lot of destruction, a lot of bad stuff. One particular guy is kind of caught in the crosshairs and watches the world fall apart. Bill Tecumseh Sherman visits him in a dream and tells him, hey, we all die young. And then, as the war continues to go on, just disaster after disaster unfolds. There's all these civilian casualties. There's a big earthquake that happens during it, and California sinks into the ocean. The world comes to a complete and utter grinding end in Calamity Song. And the vagabond in this scenario could maybe have gotten a happy ending, you know, because he's destroyed everything. He's the ruler of it all, but no. Because here's the thing. When you are a descendant of the rake, you have the same problem the rake has, which is you're plagued by ghosts. And so, the ghosts of the rake's children, as appearing in the Hazards of Love 3 Revenge, gather up the forces of literally every single ghost from the entire DMV, and just as the vagabond is celebrating victory, takes him down. And so that's it. The world comes to its final sorry conclusion. There are survivors, of course. Avery and his lover has been in jail this whole time. And so, in the song Cocoon, after everything's done, Avery goes to the jail, reunites with him, and kind of brings him up to speed on everything that's happened. But even with the survivors, the world's gone. The apocalypse has ravaged the earth, and very few remain. It's hard to say whether any of the many individuals you met during the modern era made it through to the end. It's all gone. Except not really. If you are a fan of the Decemberists, and you have been paying attention, you will notice that there's one song that I have not yet put up on the board. This whole saga, which has been filled with turmoil, misery, death, destruction, it could end on that very same note. But no, the last song in this entire universe is a song about the stragglers, the survivors, everybody at the end coming together, realizing that the world they're living in is destroyed, but that there's still hope out there. They set off to find that hope. They set off to find a new land, a new habitable place where they all can live and rebuild society anew. It could have ended in misery. It could have ended in Calamity Song, but no. It ends with sons and daughters. And there you have it. All 132 Decemberist songs organized into one cohesive shared universe. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I'm not going to tell you to like, comment, or subscribe because you know how YouTube works. Instead, what I'm going to tell you to do is go out and find hope. Even in the midst of disaster and calamity, there is hope. It may be small, it may seem insignificant, but even as the world falls apart, we will arrive, sons and daughters.